This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to The Agenda. I'm Stephen Cole. The Agenda is a brand new weekly talk show from London. We want to set your agenda on the big stories of the day. And top of our agenda this week, trade relations between the UK and China. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says his ambition is to have stronger Sino-British ties in areas like trade and investment. Here on The Agenda, we're asking how can that ambition be best realised, especially with the shadow of Brexit looming over everything. This year marks not only the 70th anniversary of the People's Republic of China, but also the 65th anniversary of trade relations between Britain and China. We'll be hearing exclusively from China's long-serving ambassador to the UK, Liu Xiaoming.
The success of China's story is not expansion. It's not to develop China at the expense of others' interests. We are for win-win.
And also in the Agenda studio, two trade experts, David Hennig and Ting Zhang. I'll be asking them about post-Brexit deals with China, what's possible and what may not be. And after all that, I'll be giving my thoughts on the state of Sino-British relations. Before that, if and when the United Kingdom leaves the European Union, the UK will need to negotiate new trade agreements, including with the People's Republic of China. And that means competing for an increased share of the Chinese import market, which will be worth trillions of dollars next year. Currently, China is the UK's sixth largest export market and the UK's fourth largest source of imports. Among other goods, the UK sends vehicles like cars, petroleum and pharmaceuticals to China. In fact, China accounts for almost 4% of all UK exports. While in turn, China sends Britain telecommunications equipment, various manufactured goods and clothing. And those Chinese goods make up for 7% of all imports into the UK. In July, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said his government would be very pro-China. He also promised to keep Britain, quote, the most open economy in Europe, unquote, for Chinese investments. And he's not the first Prime Minister to back trade with Beijing. 4 years ago, David Cameron toasted what he hoped would be a new era in bilateral trading relations. In 2018, Cameron's successor, Theresa May, reaffirmed her commitment to the development of a global partnership, ushering in the so-called golden era of Sino-British relations. Ambassador Liu Xiaoming has been China's man in the United Kingdom since 2009. He's seen 4 British Prime Ministers come and go during his almost 10 years in London. Recently, of course, he observed the very public and political agonies of the Brexit debate. And the ambassador joins me now live in the studio. Welcome, Your Excellency, to The Agenda. The British Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, said the UK has a deep and a broad relationship with China, which will continue to be important as the UK gets ready to leave Europe. You've been in London for almost 10 years. How would you describe the relationship between China and the UK?
I think relationship between China and UK, generally speaking, are in good shape. Both countries are committed to the golden era started by President Xi during his state visit in 2015. That has been reaffirmed by Prime Minister May 3 years ago and reaffirmed by Prime Minister Johnson lately when he sent a message of congratulations to President Xi and Premier Li. I think the relationship has been robust since then, since President's visit. The trade between our two countries reached historic high last year, reaching about $80 billion US. And also we have registered continuous growth of the trade between our two countries since the beginning of this year.
I wonder how you increase that level of trade. Mr. Johnson says he has ambitions for stronger ties in trade and investment. And there is a trade gap, i.e. we buy more from China than China buys from the UK, about 20 billion, something like that.
I think there's a great potentials for this trade relationship because I believe there's a commonality between our two countries. UK is very strong in high-end manufacturing, life science, chemicals, and China is very strong in telecommunications, manufacturing capacity, and there's a huge market. We would like to buy more from UK.
But I want to sort of move away from trade for just a second and come back to it in a moment and talk about Brexit. And I wonder, you've been through Brexit here, you've been watching all the debate, the arguments, the rancor. What is the view from Beijing? How are they watching this incredible row develop? And do they prefer Britain to be in the European Union or out?
We certainly follow Brexit very closely because UK is a very important, not only business partner to China, but also our two countries have a lot of collaboration cross-border, politically, economically, culturally, and we are also two very important members, permanent members of the UN Security Council.
Yeah.
We have a broad agenda internationally. So we would like to see things be resolved smoothly, satisfactorily to both sides, to EU. Both UK and the EU are two important partners to China. So we wish you the best of luck. But we believe this is very much up to UK and EU.
I understand that, but is it easier for China to deal with the UK inside Europe? Because the UK is a bit of a conduit into Europe, isn't it? Or do you prefer to deal with Europe and Britain separately? What would be most advantageous to Britain?
It's very hard for us to make a choice. We only will try to make the best of what we can have. So I think there's both advantages for UK in EU and also both advantages for UK out of EU. So we have to make the best of what we can have. But UK is now building what they call it global Britain, and I think that will provide more opportunities for collaboration between China and UK.
There is a good relationship between the UK and China, you've explained that, but is there a good relationship between Beijing and Europe? Because when I talked to Brussels before you came in, they say they're increasingly worried about what they call China's growing sway over the European economy. They're worried about how big China's getting.
I think that probably, but we certainly would like to have a stronger, robust relationship with the EU. EU is the largest trading partner for China. China is also the huge market for them. And economically, culturally, we have very strong relationship. We understand there's some worry on part of European countries, but I think it's because of misunderstanding, lack of understanding. So we want to engage with them, what we call it 4 partnerships: politically, economically, trade globally, and culturally. I think China's relation with the EU are very strong.
When you see the pictures in Hong Kong, how damaging are those pictures when they go around the world to China's reputation?
I don't think it has a damage to China's reputation. I think the more damage should be to some Western countries who I believe are behind this violence, riotous activities. I think China's gained a lot of credit from one country, two system, the success of one country, two system. I think, for instance, in my engagement with British politicians, I think some of them still fail to realize Hong Kong now is part of China. They still treat Hong Kong as a part of UK or still under British colonial rule. For instance, some people would like to give all the citizenship to the Hong Kong, MBO, and I think that shows their ignorance of the development in Hong Kong.
Does Beijing still believe in one country, two systems?
Yes, very much so. I think on the eve of our National Day, at the Great Hall of People, at the reception marking the 70th anniversary, President Xi reaffirmed one country, two systems for Hong Kong, and Hong Kong people administering Hong Kong affairs, and Hong Kong will continue to enjoy high degree of autonomy. But important thing, people, in this country, some people focus on two systems only. They forget one country, two systems is a whole concept, and one country is the foundation of a two system.
Let's go back to trade, and I want to sort of point out remarks from the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres. We talked about one country, two systems. He's talking about one world, two systems. You probably saw what he had to say. He said there's a looming risk of the world splitting in two, with the United States and China creating rival interests, currency, trade, financial rules, and their own zero-sum geopolitical and military strategies. Do you see yourselves head-to-head with America?
We certainly would like to have a good relation with the U.S. You probably know that I've been posted twice in Washington, D.C. Half of my diplomatic career is devoted to China-U.S. relations. We always believe that the world will not be a tranquil place without good relationship between China and the U.S. We certainly would work for win-win relationship between China and U.S. We do not believe zero-sum game. We do not believe in you win, I lose. We do not believe in this Thucydides trap. And so China wants to have a good relationship, and we want to have a stable, coordinated, non-confrontational relationship.
A China-US trade war, the possible US-Europe trade war, the US-Iran nuclear standoff, the endless EU-UK battle over Brexit, possible impeachment proceedings in America, the world on the move in numbers never seen before. The only global certainty seems to be the rise and rise of China. You must feel very happy, almost smug, sitting there thinking, just sit back and let it happen because China's rise is inexorable.
I think you described the world accurately. In our words, we would say the world is now witnessing changes unseen in a century. And China, I think the most important, significant part of it is rise of China. But I can't say I'm happy sitting back and watch the world is unfolding. There's so many uncertainties and predictabilities. We would like to see, we don't think China will continue our march without a peaceful environment, peaceful international environment. So that's why we always think that China will continue to follow the path of peaceful development. We would also like other countries to follow the path of peaceful development. When all countries work for peace, join hands to build a beautiful world, and you use President Xi's word to build a community, shared community for mankind, that we can have a more beautiful, peaceful world. I don't think China will develop with the door shut, with the door closed. I don't think China, in China we have saying, one flower, the bloom one flower does not symbolize the spring. When you have a garden of hundreds of flowers, that will usher in the spring. So we would like to have a garden that is our planet, to have hundreds of flowers and blossom. Then we'll have a more beautiful garden, more beautiful and better world.
I can only hope so. And so do the rest of us. Mr. Ambassador,
Okay,
thank you very much indeed for joining us here on The Agenda.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Coming up in part 2 of The Agenda, I'll be talking trade with our 2 experts and asking about the likely impact of the UK going it alone. Hello, I'm Stephen Cole. What's on your agenda this week? I know when it comes to news, you're sport for choice. So many channels, so many opinions. But it's time to step off the news roundabout, time to cut out the noise, get to the heart of the real story with a talk show with a difference. I'll be finding out what the world is thinking by talking to the global decision makers and helping you set your own news agenda. Remember, we don't just report the news, we set the agenda. And welcome back to The Agenda with me, Stephen Cole. Today on The Agenda, we're talking trade specifically between the UK and China. And to talk more about this, I'm joined from Beijing by Dr. Keiyu Jin, Professor of Economics at the London School of Economics. How would you describe the atmosphere between Britain and China regarding trade relations?
There is a new opportunity at this juncture when and if Brexit happens. I think that China's attitude towards the UK is a very open one, hoping that there will be new and deeper trade ties across these borders in areas in finance where China is going through this momentous financial liberalization program. And of course, they produce and trade complementary products, and they have a lot of areas to cooperate on in financial services. So China's stance is to work more broader and deeper with the UK.
I want to talk now about cultural links and how important they are to building trust and harmony, 2 very important elements of any Chinese trading relationship. How do you build those elements into a trading relationship?
Looking into the future, trade in terms of goods and products are going to become less and less important than trade in technology and trade in terms of technological companies across countries. So you're absolutely right that trust is going to be a critical element in that platform of trade. And so how do you build it is the right question, and I believe that cultural linkages in education is fundamental from a point of view of students going from China to the UK or the UK going to China is a starting point. But being very open about understanding the differences in cultures and values, as well as the similarities and the common goals with this open mindset would be a very good starting point. Now, the complexity of the issue, and here this is related to trade as well as technological relationships, is the ongoing tension between the US and China. Now, where is Britain going to sit in that spectrum is going to be a difficult one. And I think that will be a critical determinant of the UK-British technology and trade relationships going forward as well.
That was Dr. Keiyu Jin talking about how both countries can benefit from a closer relationship. Well, here in the studio, we have Tin Zhang, a businesswoman with many years' experience of dealing with China, and David Hennig, a former UK trade negotiator and the director of the UK Trade Policy Project. So welcome to you both. Let me start with you, Tin Zhang. You heard Professor Jin talking there about the importance of friendship between the two countries. How important to China is the UK as a friend and a trading partner?
Very important. UK has seen by China as a friendly ally in the West since UK was the first to join the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank. And then since also President Xi's visit to the UK, China and UK enter into a golden era. We see many projects having been ongoing since then. And at also a companies level, we have seen many smaller tech companies and companies going to China. But in general, I think the UK has been seen as very open to do business by the Chinese side, and overall business environment is also very good, particularly with the many Chinese, large Chinese community in the UK here. So China has always seen UK as one of the best friends in the trade.
So as far as Beijing is concerned, London is open for business for China?
Yes, definitely. And of course, UK is also one of China's largest trade partners as well.
David Hennig, are we in the middle of a golden era of trading relationships between the UK and China?
I think the golden era has yet to come, actually. I think that it's great that trade has been increasing. It reached record levels in 2017, but actually there's a long way we can still go together. The UK exports about 4 billion in services to China. We export 60 billion in services to the US. That seems to me to be an order of magnitude that's wrong. There's so much more, I think, that we can do in terms of two-way trade. But both ways, I think we can import more from China, we can export more to China, and that's really what I would be looking forward to.
And Ting, so much more room to do more trade. In what areas in particular, do you think?
Well, both goods and services. If you look at UK export to China, the largest one is in road vehicles, and then followed by manufactured goods, but on the services you have also travel, which is actually quite equivalent to the import from China. So I think all those can grow, but specifically I see that in sectors where China has set its goals for 2020, for example, in advanced manufacturing, medical science and medical products, and also agriculture, tech in general are all very good areas to grow.
David, there's a trade deficit at the moment, very much in China's favour, i.e. We import far more than we sell. What can the UK do to bridge that gap, or say narrow the divide?
Well, most economists, and I'm included in this, are not terribly worried about a trade deficit. We have surpluses with some countries, we have deficits with others. It's okay. That's just the normal way of things.
Well, let me phrase the question differently. How can we sell more to China?
Yes, exactly. So I think that's the way I would look at it. And I think what we're just hearing. So, what are the UK strengths that are appreciated in China, in my opinion? And those are high quality products, and those could be in areas like pharmaceuticals or food and drink or vehicles or engineering products. We have a lot of high quality products. I think we can export more in those areas. Look at services. Financial technology, fintech, is a big growth area in London. We really should be looking to doing more between London and Shanghai as the major financial centres, and I think already that is happening. Basically other business services, things like branding, marketing, advertising, they sound small, but actually they're really quite significant. They're areas where the UK is seen to have a great competitive advantage. For whatever reason, so far we haven't managed to turn that into a huge trade flow yet, and I think we can.
Okay, well that's a very optimistic take, David. Can I mention the sort of six-letter word here, Brexit? And the 2 points. One, the Leavers say we'll be free to negotiate trade deals with countries like China. Is that right?
I think that's right, because in the past, of course, up till now, UK is part of the EU, and so the trade deal would have to consider between China and the whole Europe. So now UK is, if after Brexit, UK is free to negotiate its own deals, and that means more tailored for the China-UK trade relationship. So on that aspect, I certainly see it as a positive.
David, what do you think? Do you think it'll be easier to negotiate trade deals with China, or was the UK used as an entrance to the European Union for China?
Well, there's certainly a little part of that for China, the UK was a part of the European Union. Now, the problem with any trade deal the UK is going to face in the coming years is going to be the tension between the trading relationship with the EU, which is clearly uncertain, our trading relationship with the United States, which is obviously another traditional ally of ours, and the trading relationship with other countries like China. Now, what I hear from a lot of businesses is actually the opportunity of Brexit is about countries like China. It is about the emerging economies, because we already have a big trading relationship with the EU and the US. Where are the growth opportunities? The growth opportunities are in China and are in many other countries. The problem is going to be almost how do we sequence this? Because I don't think it'll be easy to do a trade deal with China until the Chinese know what our trading relationship will be with the European Union.
Well, to me, the trade deal is one thing that's between the governments, but at a business level, I see an increasing interest in trade with China from the companies I work with. Many of them are tech companies, but also in retail, education services, schools, which is a big growth area for the service trade with China, for example, particularly with China's now second child policy. You see that now there's actually for the first time the growth of students coming to UK to study has surpassed that to the US in terms of percentages of students. So I see that trade deal takes time, but business going on and it's going increasingly.
So that could lead, just very briefly, David, because we're running out of time. Did you want to add to that?
I did, because more students in the UK from China means in the future we should be building on those opportunities. They will be the business leaders of tomorrow potentially, who will have a background in both the UK and China. Who better to kind of spearhead a new era, a further growing era, than students who have been in the UK?
A new era of golden trading relations, perhaps?
Indeed.
All right, David Hennig and Ting Zhang, many thanks to both of you for joining us here on The Agenda. As you heard there, the so-called golden era in UK-China relations may be yet to come, but nevertheless, the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is insisting a new charm offensive will lead to a period of booming trade and investment. 20 years ago, China was only 15th on the list of Britain's trading partners. Today, it's 4th, accounting for 7.5% of all UK trade, and that's a 5-fold increase. A burgeoning middle class in China has also become a key market for the likes of luxury fashion house like Burberry. China's rising financial clout has also made it a key investor in major UK infrastructure projects. And all of that is good news for relations between two of the world's greatest trading powers. Next week, I'll be setting the agenda in Geneva and talking to the head of the United Nations Refugee Agency, Filippo Grandi, about Europe's refugee crisis.
The failure of Europe, there's been several areas of failure, I think, but if there's one that stands out, in my opinion, is the failure to work together, not even as a continent, but as a union that already exists.
And that was just part of my exclusive interview with the head of the UN Refugee Agency, Filippo Grandi. But from this week's agenda, from me, Stephen Cole, in London, it's goodbye.